Welcome. I'm Larry Olsen, and this is the Brain Vault Podcast. Did you know that the thoughts you're thinking right now are shaping the life you live tomorrow? Well, in this podcast, we just don't talk about mindset. We decode the blueprint behind behavior, performance, and possibility. This is where science meets real-world strategy, and your brain stops running on autopilot. If you're ready to turn default thinking into intentional living, you're in the right place. Well, I want to welcome all of you to the Brain Vault Podcast. And as you know, it's where science meets success. Let me ask you this. What if nothing in your life changes? Not because you're not capable, but because you're still thinking like the person who created the problem. Which reminds me of that Einstein quote, the significant challenges we face today cannot be resolved with the same thinking we had when we created them. So let's kind of unravel that a little bit. Today's guest has spent over 16 years studying a question most leaders don't even realize they should be asking. And that is, why do high performers hit invisible ceilings, and why can't they think their way out of them? Anna Barnhill is a rare blend of science, strategy, and real-world execution. She's a professional fellow at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School, teaches at MIT, and is among the top 1% of coaches in the world. But what makes her work different is this. She doesn't focus on what leaders do. She rewires how they think. Her new book, Leader Wired, challenges a powerful assumption. This isn't a willpower problem. It's an operating system problem. And a world being reshaped by AI, the leaders who don't upgrade how they think won't just fall behind. They'll become irrelevant. Welcome, Anna, to the Brain Vault Podcast.
Thank you so much for such a warm introduction, Larry. Very excited to have this conversation.
Outstanding. Well, let's get rolling then. I got a question for you. If a high performing leader is stuck right now, but doing all the right things, what specifically is happening in their thinking that they can't see? And once they do, how do they overcome their comfort with the old way of thinking to own up to the new?
What a great question. And it has so many layers in it. I want to touch on one thing first, and then we unfold it a little bit. You
Okay.
said they doing all the right things. So here's what I actually would invite leaders to challenge. The assumption that they doing the right things. Here's what I observed. And it shows up in my coaching practice. It shows up when I teach leadership and innovation class. Students come hungry. They come hungry for knowledge. They have ambition to become better leaders. But they get stuck in the trap of acquiring knowledge and more knowledge and more knowledge. And then they trying to bolt on that newly acquired knowledge to what I call operating system, to their internal architecture. And that one consists, like you said, our thinking. How do we think? What assumptions are we making of what leadership requires of us right now? And that's the biggest ceiling that high-performing leaders can create for themselves. Stuck in that knowing-doing gap, in between land, where they know everything, they can teach it. I have a lot of brilliant executive clients who can give you a webinar on active listening and psychological safety. But when something happens and the deadlines are not being met, or maybe a transformation initiative, it's really stalling, their autopilot, their legacy leadership kicks in, and therefore they cannot be effective. Though they have all this brilliant knowledge. It's amazing.
That we used to talk about, you want to hire a teenager, well, they know everything, right? And yet I have found the same thing with leadership and as well as myself. As we get to a point where we recognize, I get it, I understand it, I know what to do, then, and this is a statement that I think a lot of leaders use subconsciously but aren't aware of it. And that is, if at first you don't succeed, fix the blame fast. So my people aren't listening, or I don't have the right people, or we don't have the right systems in place. How do you help a leader recognize that, as brilliant as they are, as experienced as they are, as much knowledge as they have, that could be the very thing that's standing in their way of being able to take appropriate action?
Yeah. And that's such an important thing because in my experience, I was working with cultural transformations. And what I would notice, well, first we know that the majority of transformations they fail. So according to McKinsey, 70% of the times transformation will fail. And what I would observe, an executive leader would jump into, well, my people are resistant. They don't like the change. Or maybe we failed in deploying some process. And I would have a heart to heart conversation. And I would shine the mirror and say, are we seeing a common denominator here? And it's you, it's me, right? And every leader needs to hold up a mirror and ask, in which ways maybe I am contributing to the problem? It starts with the mindset of ownership. It's great when you hold your people accountable, but that relationship needs to start with yourself and be applicable to yourself in the first place. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, and don't you think most of them think they hold themselves accountable?
Oh, absolutely.
So how would you get me to recognize that I'm holding myself accountable, but I'm holding myself accountable to the wrong things?
Mm, that's a great one. Well, I would say one of the easiest ways is to actually conduct a 360.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
would say, let's involve your stakeholders because oftentimes what leaders don't realize, there is a gap between how they perceive themselves and their intentions. And oftentimes their intentions are very good. They have good heart. They want to do their best. They want to make sure their company is making money. But in reality, there is a gap between their intention and the impact, how other people are experiencing their leadership. And what we oftentimes find out, there is always a gap. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's a big gap. And oftentimes their strength, something that drove their success and guaranteed their promotions, creates a ceiling for their employees and for their organization. And that's why oftentimes transformations actually don't scale, they fail.
Wow. Wow. Is that, I call that, a leader can't be in a room without the leader being there. A parent can't be in the room without the parent being there. It
Yes.
changes the conversation. Most people are intelligent enough to find out what the leader wants, how the leader thinks, and then respond accordingly. And then they have the meeting after the meeting where where they really take action on what comes out of that. So, how have you found, with anyone, to allow them the opportunity to recognize that, they are not only the one who created the challenge, but they are the one who is continuing to allow the challenge to exist by the very way that they show up. And you must have some brilliant questions. You must have some, 360s. Let's say you get some real pure information out of that. The people aren't just saying things to make the leader feel good. Um, because it's kind of hard to hide their identity as much as we'd like to think we do. Um, how do you get them to get to the point where they're coachable? You follow me? They've finally created enough awareness to realize wow, the bad news is it's me. The good news is it's me
Yeah.
because now I can do something about it.
Yeah. Well, Larry, within that question, there are actually two different answers because
Okay.
every leader actually makes a choice. It's a choice. Do I want to change? Because first, change is not possible without awareness. So, indeed, we have to create that awareness first, whether through 360 or some discovery conversations. And then we see the truth on the table. What do we do with this truth? In my experience, some leaders choose not to do the work. And the scary part, and they still continue to lead or what they think they're leading, but they just managing according to something that used to work in the past, but in current reality, it is no longer applicable.
Hmm. Now they're thinking they need a different coach.
Well, actually, I would fire them before they.
That's a very powerful concept is and that says a lot about you. You too often coaches, leaders are more about how am I doing than they are about what's my contribution. And so when you get into how am I doing, feedback's a breakfast of champions, but it's what happens when it's not positive. And you haven't gotten to the point of learning how I deal with information that's maybe not in alignment with what I think has been happening. And you must be a real master at this. I mean, you've got the background, you've been at it for a while. Um, how do you help a leader know that if they continue to be in denial, they're going to lose the opportunity to work with your brilliance?
For me, it is all about any relationship. It is about transparency in your communication and also setting up expectations and agreements. It's
Before you start?
absolutely. It's no
Gotcha.
different where you're an executive and you have direct reports, or it's a coachee relationship. You're still leading the conversation. And if you want productive outcomes, the input has to be high quality. So for me, it's an upfront conversation around my role is to provide a psychological safety, that container within which we can be honest, we can be vulnerable. We can start peeling the onion, and it's a lot of work. And it's difficult work. And it will feel extremely uncomfortable because what will happen, we will create awareness. And now we see the gap. This is the leader that I'm aspiring to be. And I thought I was so close to it. But now I'm realizing, wow, that's quite a gap. We need to build a ladder to cross, to cross this bridge. And then they make a choice. I'm willing to do the work. But what a lot of times, no leadership program that I know of tells leaders, y- it will feel extremely destabilizing because literally it will feel like ground under your feet is cracking because all the strength that drove their success will be examined, will be
Mm,
scrutinized. And what
mm,
we will uncover legacy code that is no longer working for them. It served them in the past, it made them successful, but now they need an upgrade, right? So what got them here in the current role won't get them to that next level of effectiveness and efficiency that they're seeking. And then they get stuck in the in-between zone. And that's where the true supportive coach is really needed because they start feeling less confident in themselves because they
mm,
need to start
mm,
practicing new way of thinking, new way of being, acquiring. It's almost not necessarily acquiring new skills, expanding the range. So it's
mm.
almost like learning how to
Tell
play an
me the difference
instrument.
between expanding the range and acquiring new skills.
So acquiring new skills would be we're not changing anything about how we think. We're not changing anything in our internal architecture of how we're relating to the world. and we're learning. So we acquiring cognitive understanding without necessarily putting it through our system, aligning that new knowledge with our values, our true north, and then making it our own authentic leadership playbook. And that creates disconnect and friction.
Yeah. Yeah, and the lack of authenticity sometimes because you're second guessing yourself a little bit.
Exactly. And it's extremely draining mentally and emotionally because, in a way, you have to, it's a performance, right? You have to perform confidence, you have to perform leadership in a way that doesn't feel embodied in who you
Hmm.
are.
It sounds like a lot of recovery process in the sense that there's an addiction there.
Mm,
And the addiction is to the way that they have behaved up to this point in time. And they have a lot of successes that they can point to substantiate why their platform is so strong. And now to start to take that away, and generally, you're not taking it away from a 20 or a 30-year-old. You're taking it away with someone who's been at it long enough to have developed the habits, the attitudes, the beliefs, the expectations, the neural wiring. Um, and I can see with that, what you shared earlier, how important setting the stage is prior to, and you probably can never really set them up to truly understand what it's going to feel like.
hmm
They can intellectualize what it might feel like, but until they're going through it, it can be very confronting. Um, Sometimes leaders will end up feeling shamed, which is not what was intended, but they're now feeling like, the horse they rode in on and have fallen in love with is not capable of taking them to where they need to be taking their company. So I can see where there's a lot of mastery and an art to what you do. And yet you have the credibility and the background to overcome their skepticism as to why should I listen to Anna?
hmm
Well, do you want this to happen? Do you want that to happen? I do. Well,
Yes.
then listen to Anna. So tell us more about how an engagement would go. Let's say you were going to work with me because I felt like we were stuck. We're doing well, but we're not taking on enough new business. We have beliefs that we can't handle that business because we'll have to hire new people and it's difficult to hire all of these old belief systems. Where would we start?
We would start with intellectual because that's the easiest way to talk about. We would start with probably running a few assessments so I can identify it's a gap analysis, right? We
Okay.
always want to understand the current state. Where are we at in terms of current effectiveness, emotional intelligence? In the book Leader Wired, there is an assessment based on the 7 operating components, and we would literally create a diagnostic and we would see where's our operating system creating any friction. Where is this legacy code that is still running? And instead of enabling that leader, is creating that invisible ceiling, something that they don't see, but how they can tell is they always feel busy. They always feel extremely overwhelmed and tired, but the needle is not necessarily moving. Like, are we
Mhm.
making progress? Are we making impact? No, but we are so busy. Okay, there's some legacy code that is running. And oftentimes, if they try to start pointing fingers and blaming, well, fix my team, I'm like, we absolutely can do that, but we will start with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Um, Man, so many things came to mind while you were sharing that, and I think that the challenge is the old adage. They say one of the most difficult things for leaders to be good at is delegation because there's that. internal wiring, if I want to get it done right, I need to do it myself because I know what the results are of what I do. And that can really can that can really take a hit on scaling, can it?
Absolutely. And that gets encoded so early in our career. Because when we are individual contributor, we're being rewarded, right? For having that technical expertise, for having all the right answers. As long as we control the input and output, we have that predictability that we produce high quality result. We get that external validation, acknowledgement. It feels good. It encodes in our brain. This what gets me to success.
Mm,
And then
mm,
we repeat it. We repeat the cycle, and now it's a habit, it's a behavior. Now this is what we do really well, and it becomes automatic. And what becomes automatic becomes invisible. And now it's our identity. And when it's our identity, now the leader would tell me, but this is who I am. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm like, well, let's decouple who you are and what are you good at.
mm, mm, mm. Wow. Wow. Um, who you are and what are you good at? Tell me let's peel that a little bit. What is it you want to accomplish as a result of helping them identify who they are and what they're good at?
That work is foundational to actually help us make the most important upgrade, to make us that operating system upgrade. And when I talk about operating system, it's easy to comprehend it when we think about the phone or a laptop, right? Every computer runs on operating system. And what happens if we never upgrade it? It's just running since 1995. And we have so many new tools and we start loading into our computer, new programs, new tools, and they slow down and they crash because that operating system was never designed to run the sophisticated apps. So right now with leadership, we all have that internal wiring. And it consists of our beliefs. What do we believe about this world? What do we believe about ourselves? Of what effective leadership means? It consists of our emotional processing. Do we actually have the mastery of learning from our emotions and use it for decision making instead of suppressing it? Because that's the default mode. We manage emotions by suppressing them in leadership, which is ineffective. It
Wow.
also consists of our behavioral defaults, those habits, right, that we run on autopilot without even thinking. It's also our values. That's the critical component. Because oftentimes we can say, well, my family is important. And then I would challenge a leader. Well, and if we look at your calendar, how much time do you actually spend on what you say is important? There is
Yeah, I got
oftentimes
you.
disconnect there too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you hit something very, very powerful in the sense of longevity, health, and that is you manage your emotions by suppressing them. You know, that just sounds like an ongoing cortisol drip to me that ultimately does more damage than good because we swallow it. You know, the old leader, never let him see us sweat, have all the answers, come be confident even in doubt. And that takes a toll. That wears one out. There must be another side of what you're doing that is refreshing when they realize I don't have to keep doing it this way because they've gotten to a point where they don't like who they are when they get home. They don't like the lack of what they're doing to themselves and from a health perspective. I mean, they're getting all this information because that's part of what's made them feel so strong, and yet they realize letting a lot of important areas of their life drop in the name of being busy, if you will, like you said earlier. So let me ask you this. I can see where this could easily be a 12-hour conversation. You're fascinating. Um, Let me ask you this. I'm sure a lot of our listeners right now are asking themselves, you know, am I doing what I'm good at, or am I being who I think I've become? And what happens when I get stuck? I'm feeling now I'm a little frustrated, and how do I go about learning how to change my mind? How do I go about learning how to see things differently without having to totally give up um, everything that's got me here? Because that's what some people think. I got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I have to start clean, and that's freaky.
Yeah.
Because what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
And your response is probably, well, what if it does? But before we get there,
Yeah.
what would you say to our listeners now who are kind of frustrated with, yeah, they're getting a lot of results, but they're not getting the emotional hits of satisfaction and contentment, and still feeling like they bring value.
Hmm. Well, I would invite them to do an exercise. And that exercise will help them put their life into perspective. So if they would imagine themselves laying on a deathbed, they have a few more breaths before it's done, and they look back at their life and they start putting it in perspective. How do I want to be remembered? Were there any experiences in my life that I wanted to experience, but I was too busy to? Was I truly living in alignment what truly matters to me? Not what society told me that is important. To be rich, to have more expensive car, to whatever it is. Truly what is important to me. And that shifts. It's right away, it puts everything into perspective and it creates distance from the busyness of our world, of our work, into a wake up moment. Oh, wow. Either I was in complete disconnect and maybe I should start thinking about it at least. Or maybe you realize, oh, wow, there are actually things that I'm already doing right. I'm on the right track.
Gotcha.
And either way, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Because it's a start. It's
It's
a
a start.
beginning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Beautiful. So how do people get a hold of you? How do they find out more about your book and the work that you do? And
Yeah.
what would you
So
suggest?
I would say two ways. One way, go onto the website leaderwire.com. And there they can find all the information about the book, about the Leader Wired Collective, about if some new upcoming interesting things around um, AI Institute, where I literally uploading my brain into AI, and I will have an AI coach. And that's my mission, to democratize coaching and reach as many leaders as we can. And of course, LinkedIn. Just type my name on LinkedIn. I have a weekly Leader Wired blog. And there I give a little bits and of wisdom and some prompts every leader can use with AI to help them start thinking differently.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And anyone out there who's afraid of AI, that what are we going to do when it starts thinking for itself? Um, I would ask you to recognize the choices that we have, but it all begins with the questions that we ask. What if AI becomes the greatest thing that's ever occurred in our history? And how can it benefit us? And what is the value that it brings? Any time that we get fearful or come from fear, we're focusing on not what's possible, but what are the outcomes that would be negative that could possibly occur should this happen or should that happen. And I think, Anna, as you know, it's not always the answers that are going to get us what we need. It's the question to begin with. And in AI is only as good as the questions that you ask and the input that you provide. And so I think this is fascinating what you're doing. I'm really excited to hear how that goes and to find out more about that. Um, I I really feel like we've just scratched the surface. And is there anything though that you wanna share that I didn't give you the opportunity to through where I took the questions?
I want to double click on something that you said because it is so important. I
Okay.
also see a lot of people fearing AI. AI will take away my job, or I don't trust it. It will replace humans. Let's bring factual clarity. AI is a software, humans created it. So now we can write our own destiny. Because just like fire, right? Fire can be used to keep us warm, to cook meals. Fire can be used to burn houses and destroy life. AI is no different. And something that is helpful to remember, if we're approaching AI from a lens of fear, it creates tunnel vision, it creates rigidity, and the only thing we can see is problems. So we need to elevate our thinking and start thinking, how can AI amplify my potential so I can make bigger impact as a human being, as a leader? What we can collectively create to solve problems that humanity is facing with AI that we could not. But if you're fearful, you cannot think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and for anyone out there that goes, "Oh, this all sounds like positive thinking. This is oh la di, oh la da." We're talking from a scientific perspective. When Anna's talking about operating system, she's talking about your brain, and your brain is just beginning to be tapped about what it's possible for it and capable of. And the more we open ourselves up to the miracle that we are, the more we begin to find out how exciting this thing called life can truly be. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Anna, and how many lives you are opening and eyes you are opening, and how many people are, I know, so grateful that the work you've done with their leaders. Um, because it's more than trickle down. It's so impactful what each leader brings whenever they show up. And that whole element of, what's my real influence as I go through this thing called life? Doesn't matter whether it's with the cashier at the grocery store, whether it's the dry cleaner, we're making an impact wherever we go, and we have a choice as to what kind of outcomes we're looking for from that impact. So kudos to you and what you're doing, and I look forward to reading your book um, and getting more involved in the exercises that you have going on in abundance. So thank you again for your time and your investment with us, and we very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Larry.
You bet, you bet. And all of you out there, it was a choice to tune in, and you have run into someone who is a true transformer. Change is temporary, transformation lasts a lifetime. So make sure that you pay attention to what she's up to. Get into her LinkedIn, follow her, and you'll be able to open yourself up to things that were once just an imagining and not even thought possible. So kudos to all, and I look forward to the next opportunity to be together. Thanks again, Anna, for taking your time to be with us as well.